Hey everybody, I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. It's good to have you with us. It's John STINCHCOMB later on. Reaction to some of the stuff that Dan Lanning said going back to Friday. Really good stuff from Georgia running back Zamir White. We'll cover that on the show today. Rumors about a massive recruiting weekend for UGA, at least laying the groundwork for what could be big results later on. It is, just slam-packed, jammed full on a Monday. And there's no place I'd rather be than right here with you as DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So I had a great day yesterday. It was like a really big sports day. And in addition to being a big UGA fan, I'm just a big sports fan in general. I kind of always have. I don't have as much time to follow all sports as I used to. But yesterday, sitting on the couch, watching a little NBA playoffs with my son. My daughter was hanging around. We were watching the golf. A lot of UGA guys in the mix. Dustin Johnson, 30 under par for the weekend. A little NASCAR. Watch the Braves. I'm just like flipping back and forth between all these sporting events. It's really fun right now to have this much sports in your life on television. And then I had something happen to me that I'm sure has happened to many of you before too, where you're flipping channels, you're going back and forth, you're watching a lot of stuff, and then you kind of stumble upon something. The SEC Network last night was showing the Rose Bowl from 2018, Georgia's win against Oklahoma. And it's almost like once I stumbled across that, there was no more flipping of the channels. I was almost like the tractor beam in Star Wars, like just pulled into it, and I couldn't stop watching it. I guess it had been a little while since I'd seen something close to the full game, and it just brought back such a flood of emotion, so much energy from me, remembering being there, really one of the most special weeks of my life, not including my, something involving my, my wife and my children. I don't think I've ever had more fun than being in California that week, culminating in that game. And I'm just watching every play, and I'm getting like these, goosebumps, just kind of reliving all of this. And there's parts of it you forget. It's just amazing. And then you get to the overtime, and, there's so many big plays there. Like Roquan Smith is kind of flying all over the field. Lorenzo Carter has the big block field goal, all of this leading to the Sony Michel touchdown. But in watching some of the things that Roquan did in that overtime, after really probably not having a great first half necessarily, and the incredible athletic play that Lorenzo Carter makes when he goes up and bats the field goal out of the air, this is an overly simplistic point, but it's worth saying that it's these like really special athletes that make all of this happen. Like if Lorenzo Carter doesn't have the body style that he has, really long arms, really big body, incredible leaping ability, that field goal doesn't get blocked, and who knows how that game changes the complexion of it because of that. Roquan Smith's amazing quickness, he almost levitates the way that he gets from one place to the other. If Georgia doesn't have that kind of special player, not good player, great player, if Georgia doesn't have that in the interior of the defense, then who knows how that overtime is different against the explosive offense that Oklahoma was. But because Georgia had those guys in 2017, then virtually anything was possible in a game like that. And, Georgia went on to play for the national championship. And Roquan, Carter, what some of the work they did, you get a lot of credit. You give a lot of credit to those guys for making that happen. And obviously, when you look at Georgia's defense this upcoming season, there's the thought that Georgia has these kinds of players once again, and has had some version of these players throughout the Kirby Smart era. But there's something about this 2020 defense that has a chance to be really special, that you may have some guys who are growing into their own, and some of the same kind of big plays that I just mentioned. Easy to imagine some of the Georgia players on this year's team making some of those same kinds of big plays. And I think one of the most fascinating subplots for a lot of Georgia fans involves these freshmen from a year ago growing into their sophomore seasons, a lot of them former five-star recruits, who have a chance to really break out in a big way. Last week we talked a little bit about Nakobe Dean. Dean spent some time talking to reporters. He's definitely one of those guys. Along the defensive line, Travon Walker is one of those guys. Walker may stand as one of the most important recruiting wins that Georgia has had in the Kirby Smart era before it's all said and done. The defensive line in of itself has been a position group that Georgia hasn't exactly been dominant in thus far in the Smart era. They've been good. I think there's room to be better, and I think Walker gives them a chance to be that. To say nothing of Nolan Smith, an outside linebacker, former nation's #1 recruit, the kind of guy that you could one day see being a true superstar in this sport? Well, it's Smith and Walker in particular that Georgia defensive coordinator Dan Lanning was asked about together when Lanning spoke to reporters on Friday. Now, if you go to the DawgNation YouTube page, and if you're not already subscribed to the DawgNation YouTube page, my encouragement would be for you to do that, because you can get all the coverage of what's going on at UGA heading in towards the start of the upcoming season. But I want to play a little bit of audio from this, that when Lanning is asked about these two guys, Walker and Smith, and what they have a chance to do this upcoming season, potentially becoming a part of that next great lineage of truly special athletes at Georgia, there's a word that Lanning uses in describing them that I think is really fun, and I want to see if you can pick that out here as we talk about the impact that Nolan and Travon may make this fall. Here's Dan Lanning.
I just want to see them maximize the opportunities they get on the field. Both of them are dynamic players. Both are very explosive and do a great job. I think they create issues for the offense with their suddenness, but probably more importantly, they finish. Right? Those guys run to the ball. They finish twice. They work really hard on the craft. So just seeing them expand their role as they move forward. Excited to see what they do.
Don't you love the word suddenness? The fact that Travon Walker and Nolan Smith, for their size at their positions, they're not just quick, they're sudden. That's a great way to describe that, Dan Lanning does. And I'm not quite so sure that suddenness is actually a word. And in fact, I'm almost sure that it's not, because yesterday when I was typing this, I quoted Dan Lanning as a part of a column that I wrote at DawgNation.com. And I've told y'all before, I'm not particularly well educated, so I depend on autocorrect and spell check and things like that to make sure I'm writing the way that I'm supposed to. And every time I try to type the word suddenness, my word processor platform kept wanting to correct that into something else. But I think that suddenness is still a really fun way to describe what these guys bring to the table. That not just big, not just bigness, but suddenness. Travon Walker's more than just an athletic defensive lineman. He's potentially the kind of guy that, with his quickness, creates so many problems for opposing offensive linemen that it could be an incredible breakout year for him. And Nolan Smith, it goes without saying that Smith is more than just someone who's going to be an outside linebacker that's good at containment and keeps the ball in front of him and does the sort of simple, safe stuff. This is the kind of guy that could also wreak havoc on opposing offenses this upcoming season. And this is an area in which, me being a fan of UGA and me having opinions about, what's the next step for Georgia to get over the hump, win a national championship, I make my agenda on this particular point very, very clear. I think for everything that the Georgia defense has done up until this point in time, there's still more that it can do. Georgia last year, really good at limiting yards, really good at limiting points, especially against some of the lesser offenses the team played. But those great defensive stats aren't the only ways to judge a defense. And Georgia, when it comes to tackles for a loss, when it comes to sacks, components of the so-called havoc rate that we spent a lot of time talking about this past heading into the 2019 season, I think there's still a lot more that Georgia can do in that regard. And I think it's important to analyze that and pay attention to it. And if it is true that Georgia needs to be better with its havoc plays, with its disruptive plays, what it does in the backfield, sacks and tackles for loss, then the simplest way to get there is to have individual players step up and have bigger years. And you can think about Jordan Davis in that regard. You can think about a lot of names. And the two that Dan Lanning were just talking about are both examples of that as well. What does Nolan Smith give you this year? What does Travon Walker give you this year? Do they add to their sack total? Do they add to their tackle for loss total? And a Georgia defense, as I said before, that's been really stingy in the past, can it now be more impactful this season? Individual players raising their level of play is the best recipe, I believe, for that happening. And by the way, for what it's worth, when Lanning spoke to reporters going back to Friday, he talked about this, that the emphasis from a year ago on havoc rate is something that still exists for the program this upcoming fall as well. I think this is really good from Lanning. Take a listen to this.
The biggest thing I think we've emphasized so far this offseason is the finish. We've talked about havoc plays a lot on here in the past, and that's still definitely a big focus for us. But we want to get the ball out. We want to finish. We want to impact the game by having some game-changing plays that we can create, and our players have really embraced that so far.
You hear Lanning use the word finish there. He would later on in that press conference going to describe that as not just a good pass rush move, not just getting into the backfield and having quarterback pressure or quarterback hurry, but actually getting your hands on the quarterback, bringing him to the ground. That's an example of finishing. And he said the opposite can also be true as well. you may get off the ball slowly, but if you can still, I'm going to use sacks as an example of this again, if you can still get to the quarterback and sack him, then it's just about how you finish. You may have been out of place for 80% of the play, but can you do something dynamic in the last 20% of the play that gives you a chance to finish that play strong? I think that's really good for Lanning, and this all really, really matters. And this is all, especially when you play good offenses, like what LSU was in the SEC championship game, when you are only going to be able to stop them from producing explosive plays so much. You've got to have your own version of explosive play on defense to counterbalance against that. That's what sacks, that's what tackles for loss, as what Lanning calls them, those game-changing plays. That's what they have a chance to provide. As a way of kind of wrapping this up, let me show you a stat that I also wrote about at DawgNation.com yesterday. Now, this is one of those things where it's semi-complicated to sort of say it all, but when you really process it, I think it speaks to just how valuable big-time defensive plays in the backfield really are. Let me show you this from Sports Source Analytics. This is the analytics group that does some work for the College Football Playoff. But here's what they say, and I think this is really pretty powerful. They say, on a drive with a negative play, the average FBS team scores points just 25% of the time and touchdowns 15% of the time. On a drive with a sack, the average FBS team scores points just 16% of the time and touchdowns 9% of the time. Compare that when you don't have those sacks, when you don't have those negative plays, it's 43% scoring, 36% touchdowns without a sack, 40% scoring. They score touchdowns 31% of the time. So if you want to take an offense, and in college football in this era we're in now, you see these offenses racking up yards, racking up points, drive after drive, game after game. What Sports Source Analytics says there is you can cut those percentages in more than half just by finding a way to get a negative play, just by finding a way to get a sack. That's what guys like Travon Walker, Nolan Smith have a chance to do for this Georgia defense this season. And a defense that was quite stingy a year ago, didn't give up a ton of points, didn't give up a ton of yards, can also now be more dynamic, more havoc plays with more sacks, more tackles for loss. When you face the very best offense in the country, if you can produce more of those kinds of plays, I think you've given yourself a much better chance of winning those kinds of games. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Hello to you, and thanks for being with us. No matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., DawgNation Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and we're available as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just really appreciate you being with us here today, and we appreciate our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia for making it all possible. They help equip your house with energy-efficient windows and doors. That's important. And not only does it make your home look better, which could increase the resale value when you go to sell it, it also keeps that energy inside the house, which is really important there as well. Especially at a time like this when air conditioning units are running overdrive, you don't want that air conditioning escaping out of inefficient doors, inefficient windows, ones that are not sealed properly, things like that. That's costing you money potentially. So Pella Window and Door of Georgia can help you with all of that. They're family owned and operated. That's a national company with national resource. They have a locally owned branch right here in Georgia. So you get the best of both worlds as far as all that's concerned. Also a great deal right now. Through October 1st, you can get 10% off vinyl, 15% off fiberglass, and 20% off wood windows and doors, and no payments, no interest for 12 months. Great deal there. Super easy to get in touch with, whether you want to meet in person or meet through video teleconference to kind of get those installation options explained to you. Very easy to do all of that right now. Online, PellaBranch.com. That's PellaBranch.com. Or give them a call in their Dunwoody showroom at 404-445-2979. 404-445-2979. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is viewed to be the best. Coming up here in just a couple of minutes, we'll get John STINCHCOMB as a part of a Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. Before we do that, though, I'm going to go around the doghouse, assisted today by AAA. And there was a video that Georgia put out yesterday that you should really go out of your way to see. I don't typically promote, other video products other than our own, but what UGA's official Twitter account put out yesterday with Georgia running back Zamir White, I thought was just really sensational. White's a guy that I would say is kind of a man of few words, typically speaking. He's fairly soft-spoken. I think he likes to do his talking on the field. He likes for his actions to speak for themselves. This is not a motor mouth by any stretch of the imagination when it comes to, chatting with the media, things like that. But he said some things through video yesterday about his goals for the upcoming season, that if you're a UGA fan looking for that next great Georgia running back, which Zamir White very well could be, I think this is going to get you really fired up. The entirety of the video that UGA put out is about 90 seconds. I want to play about 20 seconds worth of this. Zamir White saying when he looks at the lineage of great Georgia running backs and when he thinks about where he could fall in that pecking order, boy, it's fun to think what Zamir will be able to do for Georgia this year. Here he is maybe foreshadowing some of that.
Georgia's a running back school where like we RBU. I got to carry on that tradition with Ty and Sony and Chubb and Swift and them guys. So like I got to be the next one up to keep that going. I just got to keep on working hard and follow my teammates and just make sure the next guys up or prepared. I got to be that leader and just step up and just be that guy now.
Don't you love that? He says, when you think about Todd Gurley, when you think about Sony Michel, when you think about Nick Chubb, two of the guys that were also big parts of that Rose Bowl game that I was talking about a little earlier. You think about DeAndre Swift, who Zamir himself got a chance to play with. He says, when you think about what those guys did in a Georgia uniform, I've got to make sure I'm the next man up there in that regard. And, that's obviously what is at stake for Zamir this year and the other Georgia running backs, because it's not just Zamir, but Zamir is the one that probably has a little more of that responsibility on his shoulders than maybe other players. It's nice to see him embracing that idea. It's nice to see him openly discussing that, even if it is through a video format like this. I thought this was really well done, and I'm really excited to see what Zamir is able to do for this upcoming year. It's Around the Doghouse, assisted today by our friends at AAA. And listen, one of the things that AAA can do for you, about the roadside assistance that they provide. My family's a big fan of that. But they also create opportunities for great savings for you as well, including the AAA Savings Hack Pack. This is amazing. It's a combination of AAA benefits that are worth more than $1,000. It includes free career assistance, free identity theft protection, up to 85% off prescriptions, and discounts on food and essentials while you're on the road, which is a really good thing there as well. The Hack Pack is a part of every annual AAA membership, and just like the legendary roadside assistance, it certainly takes good care of you. So go to this website, please. It's AAA.com/go savings. That's AAA.com/go savings, and you can find out just how quickly a AAA membership will pay for itself and provide a lot of enjoyment, comfort, and peace of mind for you. So check that out. It's AAA.com/go savings. All right. We are very busy on our program today. A lot going on around UGA, getting ready for the upcoming season. Let's do even more of that now, breaking down some of the things that are out there for UGA. Always a pleasure on a Monday to welcome in John STINCHCOMB as a part of a Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. Hope you enjoy it.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We're bringing John STINCHCOMB right now as a part of a Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. Always a great chance to kind of just survey the situation with around UGA with a guy who certainly has, great affection for his alma mater, John STINCHCOMB here. And John, if you don't mind, let me begin kind of where I was just a moment ago. I was playing a small clip from Georgia running back Zamir White, and White's a guy that typically does not always have a lot to say. As I said before, he's a player that's seemingly a lot more comfortable letting his actions speak for him, which is probably a pretty nice, thing to, have said about you doing your talking on the field more so than in front of a microphone. And yet the words that he used in discussing what's next for him, stepping into the role that Todd Gurley once occupied, that Nick Chubb, Sony Michel once occupied, DeAndre Swift most recently, just ahead of Zamir the last couple of seasons for UGA. This is kind of an RBU type school where running back play is a big part of the equation. Even with Todd Monken in place this season as offensive coordinator, I don't expect running backs to have any less importance at UGA. And yet in terms of true proven commodities, Georgia probably has less of that right now because we haven't seen a lot of Zamir the way we have maybe previous running backs when they were stepping into a bigger year. It's interesting to hear Zamir talking about all of this, and I do think this is one of the big storylines for Georgia ahead of this upcoming season, and I'm guessing you probably agree with that.
I love it. I love what he had to say. I like the fact that he's wanting and willing to step into a leadership role. I think that's what separates really good teams from elite teams is leadership. And when you had as many guys as Georgia did leave for whatever reason, for the draft early or just as seniors kind of roll out, it creates a void. And each season you're looking for guys to step up. And I think Zeus is a guy that has garnered such respect for his unspoken actions more than what he's had to say. And to hear him recognize that there's an opportunity and a need that he's willing to step into, I think is one of the most encouraging things we can hear coming out of that locker room is somebody that the team respects and appreciates their actions, and then he's going to match it with stepping into that role. So man, I'm fired up about it.
And I truly believe this, that for all the talk we've had about Todd Monken and the possibility of a new quarterback, whether it be Jamie Newman or JT Daniels, someone like that, it's obvious that Georgia needs to upgrade its passing attack. And I think the fact that it hasn't really done that the last couple of seasons may be the single biggest reason why Georgia hasn't yet won a national championship. That's all true, but more than one thing can be true at once, and running the football in the SEC is still going to be important. I think the presence of Monken actually makes things easier for a guy like Zamir White because he won't face what DeAndre Swift faced so much last year, which is a stacked box at the line of scrimmage and really, in many cases, nowhere to run because defenses just weren't fearing Georgia's passing attack. So even in a year where throwing the football is probably going to be more important for Georgia than it's been, more emphasized than it's been before, I think the running back part of this is still quite important. And frankly, I think a guy like Zamir, when it's all said and done, will probably be glad that a guy like Todd Monken is the one calling the plays because I think he's going to open up opportunities for these running backs.
Yeah, we've discussed it on the show before. I think the best thing you can do for your running game is have a passing attack. We saw it last year where defenses kind of sold out and said, we will put ourselves in compromised position in the pass game because we know that Georgia is going to make more hay or try to make more hay in the run game. And it became an uphill battle because Georgia wasn't able to balance that equation. They weren't able to knock teams out of the 8-man, 9-man box at times, and challenge them in ways to make them play more conventional defense. So if you're able to attack a defense through the air, then they have to play a more honest version of their scheme instead of selling out and making a team one-dimensional or forcing them into their weaker hand. And will it help the running backs at Georgia, specifically Zeus and company? If we were able to throw the ball, you better believe it. I mean, any great offense, you look and there's a balance. I'm thinking about the Ravens this past year, and if you were to make them one-dimensional, they would have struggled a heck of a lot more. They're a run-first team in the NFL, which is borderline unheard of these days, but yet they had to keep teams honest because Lamar Jackson is a very talented quarterback, and I think I use that as a reference because I'm excited about what Jamie Newman might bring to the table, considering we haven't seen anything like that in red and black in quite some time, and probably not to the level that Jamie is capable of in well over a decade. So it gets me excited to think that there's a dual-threat quarterback that's a very viable option for Georgia this year.
There's a fun giveaway going on our friends at Marlowe's Tavern. I want to tell you more about that coming up in a moment as part of a Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update with John STINCHCOMB. John, before I get to that, though, what Marlowe's has got going on right now, let me ask you to put your offensive tackle hat on just for a moment. And before you joined us, I played some audio of Georgia defensive coordinator Dan Lanning using what I thought was a fun word to describe Travon Walker, the defensive lineman, Nolan Smith, the outside linebacker. He described their suddenness, not just quickness, but its suddenness. When you're an offensive tackle tasked with protecting a quarterback and the outside linebacker or defensive end that you're asked to block, when he's got quickness as a part of his weaponry, when it's not just strength, when it's not just size, but when it's, a high level of quickness, as an offensive tackle, how much more difficult is your job made when that's a part of the repertoire that you're going to be dealing with?
Exponentially. I mean, there is a massive difference between a guy who's fast and a guy who's really quick. Like that quick twitch, explosive power, which is the descriptors that any defensive line or defensive coordinator coach is trying to get for their guys, is that suddenness where change of direction, the explosion of power. As a tackle, that's a nightmare scenario where you've got a guy who's got the size and ability. I mean, heck, we saw Travon run down kickoff this past season. And so he's athletic, but to combine a quick, sudden burst, man, that's a game changer and puts tackles in binds, really just across the line. Same thing with guards and centers. It happens a lot quicker. So if you're an interior player and you catch an edge right off the snap, then you're playing catch-up as an offensive lineman for the rest of the down. So that suddenness and explosive quickness, power combination is what really makes it separates the good ones from the ones who are super effective. And it's exciting to hear that we've got multiple guys where that adjective applies.
You know, we talked to you a lot about Marlowe's Tavern, what we call house-made magic, the great food they're making in-house at the local Marlowe's Taverns, including the one right there in your neighborhood each and every day. But Chef John Metz, the head chef there at Marlowe's Tavern, also knows that there's been a lot of great house-made magic in your very own home during what's been going on over the course of the last few months with the coronavirus. And he wants to celebrate some of that with you right now with what they're calling a What You Been Grilling contest. I think this is really fun. He wants to, John Metz does, the head chef there at Marlowe's Tavern, hear about what you've been grilling up, the recipes that you've been using, and what's been going on during the pandemic. And they're going to award some terrific prizes for your best recipes on this. The grand prize package is worth more than $1,400 and includes a large big green egg. So this is incredibly fun. Here's what you need to do. Go to marlowestavern.com, complete the entry form. Now, the entries must be submitted by October 5th, and the winners are going to be announced on October 24th. So Marlowe's Tavern, cheers to that. And, of course, that's going to be a lot of fun as you head towards the upcoming fall here. So check out marlowestavern.com for a lot more on how you can be involved in the What You've Been Grilling contest and have a chance to win a prize package that include a big green egg. That is certainly really fun. John, let me keep the theme. We're talking about, outside linebackers, defensive ends, and, I make no bones about this. I'm a fan. I want Georgia to win a national championship, and I'm no different than any other fan when we all have our reasons for why it hasn't happened yet and what it's going to take to get Georgia over that hump. I told you just a moment ago that I think a more explosive offense is a part of that equation for Georgia. But I also think a defense that does a little better at producing those sacks, those tackles for loss, I think that's important too. Georgia had just 31 sacks a year ago. That put them kind of like middle of the pack in the SEC, kind of, middle-ish of the pack nationally there as well. For a Georgia defense that has so much talent, for a Georgia defense that really has had so many levels of success in all these other categories, also being impactful in the backfield, I think continues to be kind of the last discovered country for this defense. And I'm happy to hear that when Dan Lanning spoke about this on Friday, that's still something on his mind, and that's still something that he wants to see more from this Georgia defense, because I think it is fair to ask them to produce more in that regard. Do you agree with that?
Well, what was the term last year? It was chaos or havoc?
Havoc rate. That's right. Havoc rate.
Yep, havoc. And part of that is, we look at last year, we're a little bit spoiled because that's arguably one of the best defenses Georgia has fielded throughout its history. And you look at it and you say, where can there be improvement? And the one area that really sticks out is affecting the passer and getting after him. It comes in sacks, it comes in disruptions, and moving the quarterback off his spot. And there were flashes, don't get me wrong, but there wasn't that consistent every week, week in, week out. You knew that quarterback was going to be under duress. I think it was really highlighted against LSU late in the year where Joe's sitting back there and he's got too much time. You can't give quarterbacks of that caliber extra half second, full second to survey the field. It puts the entire defensive secondary in a bind. So what I was, I was thinking while you were describing grilling, first of all, if my mouth is watering, I'm glad Marlowe's is once again challenging us to think about some awesome food.
No doubt.
But I was thinking back to watching Nolan play last year and how, his motor is nonstop. He's got great power. But if I were trying to critique him and wondering what step he could take, it's that it is the suddenness. It's knowing when to transition or trigger your moves, and that comes with experience. So to hear the defensive coordinator specifically highlight that as a real function of their game now, not only with Nolan but also Walker, it gets you excited because candidly that's a piece that needed improvement. If you're going to compete for a national championship, you have to have a disruptive force up front, and they've been consistent. This past season showed that they were dominant against scoring in the run game, but one area that they can certainly improve is affecting that passer, and I think we've got the horses to do it. It's just a matter of getting them on the same page, getting them developed, and making it a consistent action each Saturday.
Let me finish on this topic for a moment. And one of the things, John, over the course of the years, I've always said is I'm generally in favor of policies that benefit players, because obviously it's the players that we enjoy watching on these Saturdays, not just Georgia players, but all the players across the SEC and college football. I like them to have certain levels of freedom and certainly make college football as enjoyable as we can for them. For the most part, when players transfer, I wish them well. And even for guys sometimes that go to UGA rivals, I really don't have a problem with that typically. If they weren't happy at Georgia, if they weren't playing as much as they thought they should at Georgia, they got a chance to go do that somewhere else. I, for the most part, as I said before, just kind of wish them well when they do that. I have felt differently about the CADE Mays situation, going from Georgia to Tennessee. This has been controversial over the course of the last few days because Mays was denied immediate eligibility with the Vols, and they're kind of trying to fight back on that. Mays family via the court system, Jeremy Pruitt just via the media and the PR campaigns, things like that. And John, my opinion on this is, Mays was starting for Georgia, playing a lot for Georgia, playing a multitude of positions, and to kind of, as I would describe, sort of cut and run the moment things, there was any adversity whatsoever, position coach leaves, things like that. To me, it does seem like a just result that he couldn't transfer within the conference and get immediate eligibility. I feel different about Mays than I did Brenton Cox, who I've never said a bad word about being down at Florida. He was maybe on the verge of being passed up by some guys. I don't think Mays necessarily was. I think Mays having to sit out a year just kind of feels fair to me. Where do you come down on some of this involving CADE Mays?
I think our frustration comes from the inconsistency and the nebulous world that they decide on who is eligible immediately and who is not. As fans, we just don't get it. And truthfully, we don't have all the information. We don't know exactly what was in CADE's case that they made and presented to the NCAA to try to get instant eligibility. There's speculation out there, and there's certainly rumors that are swirling, but I certainly have not been able to see what case was presented that they had to rule on. And now you get in the Twitterverse, and that's a dangerous place to be because speculation is pretty rampant. I think the issue comes down, and this isn't a CADE Mays issue, this is a NCAA issue, is that there's no consistency that we are aware of. You look at a couple of years ago, Justin Fields and Martell were able to transfer immediate eligibility. Luke Ford does the same thing with some family situation that seemed, at least from the outside, to be of legitimacy, that's worthy of consideration. Two get accepted and one get denied, and you're left scratching your head of saying, I don't understand the criteria anymore. And I think if we could provide just a blanket clarity on all situations where it's cut and dried. If your position coach or your coordinator, I'm thinking back to a lot of players take issue with, and rightfully so, there's zero penalty for a coach to transfer from one school to another. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No.
This is a conversation, BA.
Well, I definitely feel like that there is an obvious inequity between the fact that coaches do move about all the time from one job to the next, and it does seem like we treat players differently. I will certainly acknowledge that part of it.
Yeah, and I think that's an issue. And you're talking about, I think there needs to be a hiring and firing season. I think it should come after the season. I don't like the fact that we have devalued bowl games to the point where it's almost laughable, whether it's coaches or players just saying, my season's over. I'm not playing for a national championship. I may or may not shut it down before the season's out, but it's certainly in consideration and now a legitimate case for a number of players to say, I'm just going to forego the bowl game. It's of no consequence to me because we've seen coaches do it for so long. So I think for this specific case of transfer eligibility, I think there should be some opportunities for guys that if their position coach or their coordinator or head coach leaves, then there's an opportunity for them to transfer immediately. I think if there is, I think there probably should be a 2-year prerequisite before you transfer. If you transfer before that without some other extenuating circumstance, you should just sit out a year. I think programs invest a lot in these recruits, and they spend a lot of time to get them on campus. So for them to leave after less than a year at some point, you're looking at a kid who came in into July, and by January they're on another campus. That was a heck of a commitment and investment in them to make them a student athlete at your college for them to have immediate eligibility somewhere else. So I think the bottom line is I think there's a lot we can discuss about it, but there just needs to be clarity as to what the requirements are for eligibility when you transfer. I think that's what players are demanding at this point, and they're just so frustrated. Cade's probably case in point at this stage in the game is, I'm frustrated. I don't get it. I don't get it how you can say yes to these guys and my situation is any different or worse.
At the risk of keeping you too long, let me squeeze in one more thing on this, which is, I brought this up on a DawgNation video we did with our other DawgNation teammates this week. They all thought this was crazy, but you look at Cade, he's from Knoxville. His dad played for Tennessee. His dad's a big Tennessee booster. Had the Butch Jones situation not taken such a sour turn, Cade Mays probably never comes to Georgia. Is there any thought, when the family is so deeply tied to Tennessee, that if it wasn't for kind of this crazy set of circumstances around the Vols, he wouldn't be coming to Georgia anyway? Should there have been some sort of foreshadowing on Georgia's part that it was going to be hard to keep a Tennessee guy like this happy at Georgia for 3 to 4 years anyway?
I don't think so. I think the coup came when he decided to sign with Georgia, and that was a decision that he made, and it up to this point was a good one. I mean, he had success. He was able to play early, played a number of positions. If that's his beef, that was also one of the things that he touted as a strength, and Georgia utilized. I think, as much praise as Coach Pittman has received from all of us, me included, and from his players, there was never any pushback to the utilization of Cade as a utility player across the board. I think it spoke to his ability more than anything. So for him, and again, I hate speculating because I don't know exactly what's in those cases, but there is certainly some swirl that there was, a toxic environment and some of those type things. That's hard for me to rationalize, considering all that was said, not only from Cade, but from the environment and players that were in there or shared that same environment that he did.
John STINCHCOMB, incredible stuff. We appreciate your time here on our Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. We'll look forward to talking to you about the Dogs some more. We're getting close to the start of the season, which I know you view as a good thing, much the same way I do, and I'll enjoy continuing to break it down with you.
I look forward to it, B.A. Can't wait to actually watch some real football.
No doubt about that.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
So really good stuff with John STINCHCOMB, as always. Just a guy whose voice I always have great respect for. And I think that his take on the Cade Mays situation is measured and thorough the way that you would expect it would be. Let me transition and talk some more about that as we move into our SEC Through. The honest truth is, as I said before, I can't deny that I think that Mays was treated the way that he should be. This notion that you're going to play, for Georgia one year and against Georgia the next. There are lots of walks of life where that's not allowed. There are, non-compete clauses in lots of industries. It is true, as John pointed out, we don't exactly treat college football coaches that way, and there's probably an inequity on that. And the honest truth is I've never quite understood why we don't treat their contracts a little more specific to what the language actually is in the documents. I'll never quite understand that, but it is true all the way around. However, jumping to Tennessee, playing against Georgia this year, I think that's a just result in all of this. The Mays family using the legal system trying to fight against that. I don't fault them necessarily for doing that. As I've said before, the media will always love lawyers because lawyers have the whiff of credibility. They give incredibly volatile quotes, which look good in print, and they're easy to get on the phone. So from that standpoint, lawyers will always be valuable sources for the average sports writer. So when a lawyer connected to Cade Mays says toxic environment, the lawyer knows what he's doing. He's helping make the case for his guy, and he'll use that in the media. Media loves the fodder that comes from a lawyer on this. Ultimately, I don't think that probably ends up amounting to all that much. I know Jeremy Pruitt, referencing the other lawsuit, the one that May's family had with Georgia, going back to what happened with the folding chair, said that he thought that, that could create kind of a bad environment for a guy like Mays at Georgia. But honestly, even though I don't really fault Pruitt for trying to do what's best for his team, fighting for a guy like Mays to be eligible, the idea that this happened, then Mays came to Georgia after that, certainly kind of throws some water in the notion that what happened to Mays' dad in and of itself creates a toxic environment in Georgia. I just don't believe that. Now, I don't fault Tennessee for trying to fight it, Pruitt for trying to fight for his player. If it was Georgia, you'd probably expect the Dogs to kind of do the same thing. Coaches have a way of arguing for whatever happens to be in their best interest. But the notion that it truly was a toxic environment for Mays at Georgia, I think that's just false. I think that's incorrect. And I think the notion that a guy like Mays ought to be able to just bounce around for whatever SEC school he wants to after having started the previous year for another one, no, I don't. That doesn't make a ton of sense to me. There is a lot of talk around the SEC about how things are going on campuses for regular students with the coronavirus and the impact that's going to have with football. There's all kinds of photos, and for the most part, these are young people, 18, 19, 20-year-old people behaving the way that 18, 19, 20-year-old people, have a tendency to do. I know the Alabama president kind of came out with this sweeping, proclamation of, if y'all don't behave, I'm going to turn this car around right now. I mean, I just don't... I just don't know what you're supposed to do with this. I mean, this was very, very predictable. Kids are going to act like kids. I just don't know how you're supposed to mitigate the fact that, young people are just going to, at some point in time, exercise their freedom. And you see all kinds of examples of that not always being, the wisest course of action, but that's just kind of what it's going to be. I've never been scandalized by the idea that, you can't have football if you're sending the regular kids home. I've never been scandalized by that. Look at LSU, for instance. There's the hurricane thing right now. The regular students are not having classes. The football team's going to keep practicing. I have no idea how much weather is supposed to come in Baton Rouge. I don't know if that's safe or not. Not my place to say that. But in terms of the fact that the football team would be treated differently than the regular students, we've just seen countless examples already of this in college sports going back for years. NCAA tournament, for these teams that go on these long runs from the beginning of March through the, sort of second week in April, these guys and gals for the ladies tournament, they're not going into a regular classroom. They're taking their classes online or, doing it through a tutor or whatever else. This is not new territory for college football necessarily. And so I think it's a setup for failure for the people who, keep wanting to say, well, if you're treating the regular students one way, you've got to treat the football players whatever other way. I think that's only true if you want it to be true. It's only true if you make it true. I think everybody else is just trying to do the best they can. And by the way, even though I kind of criticize the academic side of this sometimes, I think even those folks, for the most part, are just trying to do the best they can and navigating what is just all the way around kind of a weird situation. By the way, speaking of weird situations, so today we do this show live starting at 10 a.m. every single morning. It's almost 11 now. About an hour from now, the preseason Associated Press poll is going to come out. Now, this has been semi-controversial, although probably not that big of a deal. So for the preseason poll, the one that comes out today, there will be every team in America in consideration for this poll. So you'll see Ohio State in this poll. You'll see Oregon in this poll. You'll see other Big Ten, Pac-12 teams. You will see them in the preseason poll. However, once the games begin, my understanding is they're only considering the teams that are actually playing. Why are they doing it this way? I honestly don't know. But when you see this thing today, that's going to be semi-controversial. The fact that, Ohio State will be no lower than second or third in this preseason poll, if I had to guess. Clemson probably number one. Ohio State's right there below that. So is that salt in the wound of the Buckeyes' parents for not getting a chance to play? That controversy is not going anywhere, even though the national media is trying to play cover-up for league commissioner Kevin Warren. That thing's not going away anytime soon. How much more frustrated do they get when the AP poll ranks them second or whatever in their preseason poll, and obviously teams like Oregon ranked fairly highly there as well, too. So this is going to be weird, but that is coming out today, and I guess we'll see where the dogs fall and all of that as well. The rest of the SEC, we will make that your SEC through. And I guess one of the other things for the AP poll that'll be interesting is, especially given the fact that every team is worth consideration, like a team like Tennessee just missed the coaches poll. They were 26th. Do they make the AP poll? Does a team like Kentucky, who was somewhat close to sneaking in? Do they sneak in? Are there other SEC teams that make the AP poll that didn't make the Coaches Poll that'll probably be worth paying attention to? So Jeff Sentell, DawgNation.com, has a very interesting piece up right now that I wanted to address as a part of DawgNation Daily presented by Pella Window and Door here. So apparently there was a very big recruiting weekend for Georgia. Now, listen, the caveat to all of this is you can't have what you think of as recruiting activities. This is not a visit to UGA because the NCAA has prohibited that right now. This is a visit to Athens. Oklahoma had a version of that this week, kind of got some national attention. Seems like Caleb Williams, the quarterback commit, was a little bit of an orchestrator of that, kind of one of the organizers for that. Georgia apparently had a pretty big event going on this weekend, too. Now, this is what Jeff Sentell says the potential guest list included. Corey Foreman, the 5-star defensive lineman. Mason Smith, 5-star defensive tackle. Amarius Mims, 5-star offensive lineman. Brock Vandegrift, who's already a Georgia commit. Lavassier Carroll, who's already a Georgia commit. Terrian Arnold, the 4-star safety. Xavier Sori, the 4-star linebacker. All of those names allegedly or I guess potentially, were a part of the visit weekend this weekend, coming into Athens, getting the chance to be a part of that. We at least have some photographic evidence that 5-star defensive tackle Mason Smith was at least in the state of Georgia, according to his Instagram story. I took a snapshot of this, of Mason Smith, and we'll show that to folks. He was in Atlanta. The internet says he had some family business in Atlanta, and maybe that's what allowed him to kind of get over to Athens. Mason Smith kind of famously is close friends with Corey Foreman, nation's #1 player. Foreman has been kind of thought to be maybe more in the mix for Georgia since his decommitment from Clemson. This is obviously, pretty substantial proof of that, you would say, and a huge, huge development potentially because, and I think that Jeff wrote about this. I haven't had a chance to read the full story that he's put up at DawgNation.com because I've been doing the show, but, we're used to seeing scavenger hunts and, they had the West End Zone reveal not too long ago, which brings a lot of, recruits on the campus. So this year, because of the coronavirus, you haven't been able to do any of that kind of stuff. This seems kind of like an unprompted, player-led opportunity to get folks together. Obviously, Brock Vandegrift, easy for him to be a part of this because he lives in the Athens area already. Lavassier Carroll is a Georgia commit who's not in the state of Georgia. He's going to IMG Academy, but he's so outspoken about Georgia on social media. Not surprised to hear that he may have been kind of a part of all of this. So, huge development here. I ask you to read this from Jeff Sentell there at DawgNation.com. More on Foreman, more on Smith, and the chance that some of these elite names that you wondered, is Georgia really all that involved with them? Is this going to be a disappointing 2021 cycle, or will we see what Georgia has done in non-COVID years, make a big push to put an elite class together, even after sometimes a little bit of a slow start? The evidence here, according to what Jeff Sentell is writing at DawgNation.com, that is indeed something that has a chance to happen. I know you already will, but I'll say this anyway. This is definitely a story worth following here, especially for guys like Foreman and Smith, who you just need that opportunity to get them, even if it can't be on campus right now, get them into Athens, get them, connected and feeling that little bit of a relationship with the other Georgia commits here. This could be a big building block for what could be a fun 2021 cycle to come. Good stuff from Jeff Sentell at DawgNation.com on that. And nice to know that some of the top prospects in the country were apparently in Georgia and possibly in Athens this past weekend. All right, so we'll get ready to wrap up here. By the way, weird story involving Isaiah Wilson over the weekend. I guess, at a college party, almost, am I right about this? Almost jumped out of a 2-story balcony, tried to escape being caught here. I'm almost going to remind you of that moment in Almost Famous when the rock band goes back to the young person's party there. Was it Topeka? Just good old Topeka people. I believe that's the line from Almost Famous. Isaiah, be careful. Be careful. That first-round draft contract comes with a lot of money. You can't be jumping out of balconies. Be careful on that. But Isaiah's still a young guy. I'm sure he probably feels a little bit more of a personal connection with people who are still in college. After all, he'd only be a redshirt junior himself if he was still at Georgia, so I'm sure he feels a little bit more of a personal connection than some of his fully grown Tennessee Titans teammates. But nonetheless, we wish Isaiah Wilson well, and we also wish you well with a Gator Hater Updater on the way out the door. 1,395 days. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door. And on video, Lot covered in today's show. We appreciate all of you being a part of it. We thank our friends at R.S. Andrews for making the R.S. Andrews cool down possible. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. You can trust R.S. Andrews to do all of that for you. And you can find them online at rsandrews.com. If your water heater goes out, in many cases, R.S. Andrews can replace it for you the same day. But as I said before, you've got to find them online at rsandrews.com. All right. Let me go to Facebook first today because I know the last few days I started on YouTube. So let me try to start on the Facebook side of this thing. Pull that up. And I hope all of you had a great weekend. Hope all of you are like me, looking forward to the start of the upcoming season. I'm just really excited about all of this. Just really having a good time with all of it right now. All right. On Facebook, let's get those comments up and rolling here. And we'll talk to you about it here today. Shane Guy says, any games on this weekend, BA? If in a normal year, this would have been the week upcoming that Navy was supposed to play Notre Dame in Ireland, I believe. So we've had a lot of that taken from us. It's kind of weird. I was thinking about this over the course of the weekend. It's almost like I've lost track of what normally would be going on at a time like this. This would not only be an NHL playoff time or an NBA playoff time, but it normally would be a preseason football time. Like, we would have had, I guess, week 2 of the preseason this past weekend in a normal set of circumstances. And it just doesn't, I don't know, I'm lost with what normally would be going on in the sports world. So there are some things we're seeing now that we normally wouldn't be seeing this time of year, and there are things that we would typically see going on that we're not getting a chance to see. Preseason football is one of those things that, generally speaking, I don't necessarily love, but it's also the kind of thing, if I stumble across it on cable TV on a Friday night or a Saturday night or something like that, I don't typically turn the channel either. So we are missing that right now, and we would be missing those week 0 college football games if not. Jarvis Hanna says FCS starts Saturday. I don't think the FCS is playing till the spring, I don't think. Jermaine Dunbar, good to have you back. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate that. Shane Guy says, I'm heard some smaller conferences may play. Philip Jordan Wells says, Iron Eagle or Top Gun. I like Top Gun the best. I have low expectations for the Top Gun sequel. However, when I was a kid, I was a very big Iron Eagle fan. That's one of those movies, not Iron Eagle, the CBS play-by-play broadcaster, but Iron Eagle, the movie with was it Doug Masters, was that guy's name? Had the tape, the cassette tape taped to his thigh, going to save his dad from whatever country he was going to do that from. Iron Eagle was a very 80s movie that I very much enjoyed. The great Louis Gossett Jr., I believe, was the person that was helping the young kid fly the fighter jet. That was a good movie. Ricky Shane Roland Roro says, thanks for the hard work. I appreciate that, Ricky. Thank you for stopping by today. Yeah, Jermaine King, Chappie Sinclair. That was Louis Gossett's character's name. I'm glad y'all have seen that. Randy Hall says, please don't forget about the fan of the month. I have not. Pete Williams likes it too. I'm glad to know that. Jamie Huff says, if Kirby gets Smith, Foreman, and Smile Munden, he says, good God. Yeah, listen, Jamie, that'd be fun to see. We kind of needed that this weekend, and one of those things that there's so much chatter about it, and very little of this confirmed by the players themselves on social media other than Mason Smith showing himself to be in Atlanta. There's very little confirmed about this. It's almost like, I'm speaking here as a fan. I don't cover recruiting from a professional standpoint. I mostly consume recruiting content much the same way that many of you do. We just talk about it on the show here. I talk about the news that other people break. It's kind of always been my job. And so it's one of those things like you hope it's true because we just haven't had much of this. And most of that's related to the coronavirus. That's of all the things about the coronavirus, it's just kind of upended the normalcy of our life. The lack of fun recruiting stuff is an example of that. At least it has been for me. By the way, one of my favorite stops on the PGA Tour Champions is the one that's Big Cedar Lodge there in Missouri. It's near Fayetteville, Arkansas. So they have an event starting today, and Phil Mickelson is playing today on the PGA Tour Champions. Just turned 50. That's going to be fun. And I realize most of you don't care about that, so I'll leave it at But we got a lot of folks that checking in that haven't been here for a while. Anthony Rockboy Kurgle checking in too says, "Yeah, I shaved the beard. At some point in time, I may grow it back. I just kind of had to go back clean shaven for a while. I think to be completely frank, I think my bosses were glad that I shaved it. So I guess I'll be a good corporate soldier here and go clean shaven for a while." Shelton Tucker, this may be reference towards me. Maybe it's just reference towards all of you. Says, if we lose to Auburn and Newman's the quarterback, I hope you blame him the way that some of y'all did Jake, or maybe me blaming Jake. I mean, listen, that's the tough spot about being a quarterback at Georgia. There's always some blame to go around.
Brandon, we have some breaking recruiting news.
Do we really?
You know the name Nugget Warren?
Yes.
Deshaun Warren,
Yeah.
4-star cornerback,
Yeah.
JUCO.
Uh-huh.
He's just committed to Georgia.
How about that? Nugget Warren, welcome to the fold here. That's a big-time get for the Georgia Bulldogs. A guy that Jeff Sintel has told us about for a while and talked about. So Nugget Warren, good-looking junior college defensive back commitment right here on the show. You got to give him some credit for that, for doing that while we're still on the air here. So y'all welcome Nugget Warren to the Bulldogs. Keeping going what has been kind of a nice run for UGA defensive back recruiting. After Javon Bullard this past weekend, you'll add Warren here now. There's a lot of chatter that Nyland Green may be a part of this at some point in time. We talked about Green last week as a part of one of our DN90 broadcasts. So Nugget Warren now in the mix here, and a lot of likes coming in on this. Linda Carter Sapp, thanks for the kind words about that. I appreciate that. Thank you for saying that. Charlie Gresham says babyface BA is better than no BA at all. I'm not quite sure how baby-faced I am anymore, but maybe I still am. But I appreciate that, Linda. Thank you. And Charlie, I appreciate that too. Robert Reynolds says, who's planning on being in Charlotte for UGA Clemson? Boy, I hope that's not the next game I attend, but I am planning on being there. Ken Feinberg says, if no tickets are allotted for visiting, good to see Ken too. I feel like we haven't seen him in a while either. I feel like we got a lot of fresh faces back in here we haven't had in a while. Ken says, if no tickets are allotted for visiting teams, shouldn't UGA get all the tickets for the Florida game? That's certainly an interesting take. If it's like 2017, by the end of the game, it'll only be Florida fans by that time anyway. So you may be onto something. Let me go over to YouTube for a moment. And by the way, for those of you who may have stepped away for a moment or not being paying attention a moment ago, Nugget Warren, very impressive junior college defensive back, 4-star prospect, thought to be in the mix for Georgia now for a while, has committed to UGA. So big news here on this Monday. Jay Scheib says, why are they worried about the band members' trumpets? Test them before the game. Let the trumpet sing. I guess this is true that, and I don't know of what I'm about to, I really have no idea of what I'm about to speak, but I'm going to say it anyway. So when you're playing these like brass instruments, you do have to just like really blow into those things hard, right? And like there's just going to be spittle flying everywhere. Like I guess the brass instruments are a potential coronavirus hazard, right? Now, I'm not saying they shouldn't have the marching band for that reason, but it is probably true, right? Like you have to figure out some way not to just like spew saliva everywhere if someone like me picked up like a trombone for the first time and like tried to make a noise with it, I don't think I'm gonna be able to do it, right? You have to really know how to like get that diaphragm going and get that thing to come out. We have tons of former Redcoats that watch our show all the time. They can tell us about this. But if you're really trying to get going with like one of those brass instruments, it's just not gonna happen. You got to really know what you're doing, and to make it make the noise that it's supposed to make. Plus, don't those things have like the release valve for like spit anyway, which has always seemed really gross to me. But that's how you do it, right? That's how you make the instrument work. Bill McConnell says, turn down the AC and you won't need the double shirt. Sometimes it's just like wearing the double shirt. But yeah, Bill, thank you. Scott Harris says, does the team have to reveal if someone tests positive? Given the choice, I think Kirby keeps it in-house. I think that's probably the way that's going to go too. Jalen Jackson says Corey Foreman now has posted a picture of all of them together in Athens. It's confirmed they were all there in one picture. That's good to know, Jalen. Thanks for sharing that. I didn't see that. I would like to have seen that. Was that Instagram story, or is that somewhere where it can still be found? Because I'd like to see that. Tristan West says, thanks for the good intel to Mr. Sintel. No doubt about that. Nugget Warren in the mix for Georgia here for the class of 2021. I told you, speaking of Bill McConnell's point, I told you the other day I might start wearing pullovers every single day. I'm not doing that now. I wore a short sleeve the other day, and I'll wear one again this week too. Sometimes I just like to kind of mix it up. Blind Squirrel Sports does ask a really good question, and I don't know the answer to this. It says, if the Redcoat Marching Band isn't allowed to perform at football games during this COVID-affected season, will they still allow the lone trumpeter tradition to continue? That's a really good question. I mean, I hope they do find room for the Redcoat Band. It's a tricky situation because it's just limited. You know, these marching bands are big. They take up a lot of space in a year in which there's just not a lot of space to go around. So that's tricky. It is tricky. But I'm hopeful they can find a way to make that work because I love the lone trumpeter tradition. I'm a huge fan of the Redcoats. I always have. I'm like the guy that, you know, would listen back when CDs were a thing. I'd listen to the Redcoat Band CDs. Sometimes when I'm, you know, trying to get a little exercise, I need to get more exercise than I do. But sometimes I'll, you know, kind of throw in some YouTube stuff of, you know, various Georgia things, Redcoat stuff like that. And I love all that kind of stuff. It gets me fired up. I hope it's still a part of college football because there are little traditions like that to me that separate the college game from the NFL game. Not that I hate the NFL, but I do like college better. And it's that stuff that happens around the game in the stadium that I think makes college football what it is. And I think the band is a part of that. You know, we're in kind of a time now where a lot of the in-stadium atmosphere in a lot of places is created by something other than the marching band, right? And, you know, the stuff that you play on the loudspeaker is always going to be louder because, you know, for the most part, you only hear the band in the direction that it's playing towards. But I still like all that kind of stuff. I still want it to be a part of what happens in college football. Jay Shipe says, Mohawk if we beat Alabama. So, like, the one thing about me is I'm never going to have a Mohawk because the spot on my head I have the least hair is right across the middle. I almost have, like, the reverse Mohawk. Yeah, almost like, you know, Road Warrior Hawk. Like, that's what at some point in time, that may be what my hair is. It has, like, just two big stripes on the side and nothing in the middle. I'm afraid of that at some point in time. Georgia Ethics Watchdog says, are you guys going to be broadcasting from away games? Boy, I hope so. GEW. I hope so. We don't know yet, but I hope so. I'm going to try to find some way to be there if I can. Listen, I mean, ultimately I got a job to do and I'll have to do whatever, you know, my job requires. But the thought of not being at these games is, and I know for many of you, this is a very real possibility. And so I'm right there with you. But as it stands right now, it's not a given. Noah Sheldon says I should grow my hair out. Like, I mean, honestly, like, I have a lot of side hair. Like, if I really went, you know, like, you ever watch, like, Welcome Back, Kotter, or, like, one of those shows in the 70s? Like, if I really wanted to grow hair like that, I believe I almost could. I really do. Big Willie Mammoth says that hairstyle will be called the Fine Bomb. Yeah. Unfortunately, by the time I'm Paul's age, my hair probably will look like that. Unfortunately, I may be heading in that direction. We got to get ready to go here in a little bit. Pete Williams says I got to do the Road Warrior face paint. I wouldn't mind doing that at some point in time. I used to love the LOD, man. I used to love them. That was always my favorite brand of wrestling, like that, like mid to late 80s NWA, not the hip-hop group, but the professional wrestling promotion. Road Warriors, Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express, Horseman. That was always my brand, man. That was my favorite thing in this world about old YouTube stuff. I still go down rabbit holes in that old NWA stuff all the time. Marshall Fleming says, once I start losing my hair, I should go clean shaven. He says the women love the shaved look. I think the problem is, Marshall, is the reason why the women may love that on you is you may have like a round shaped head. See, this is what I'm worried about. And I won't spend a ton of time on this, I promise. My head is shaped funny, and so if I ever, it's huge and it's shaped funny. So if I ever have to go clean shaven, I'm not going to look like one of these guys with like the really, you know, nice round bald head. That's not what I'm going to look like. Mike Mazzell shot an 81 yesterday. That's fantastic, Mike. 81. That's a good time. Chase Barbie says Hulk Hogan mullet. Sure enough, Remember when Randy Macho Man Savage used to spray paint the top of his head? Part of me has thought, well, maybe if things get bad enough, maybe I'll just spray paint the top of my head the way Macho Man would have. All right, we got to get ready to go. Michael Webb says he has a huge and growing library of classic wrestling. Well, that's good. That's good stuff. I'm telling you, I could watch it all. Like, when we were in the heart of the coronavirus lockdown, like when it was like March, I have to admit, like, even though I was loving doing the show every day, beyond that, I don't want to say depressed, because depressed is like a clinical meaning. That's not what I mean. I mean, I think I was sad. That's what I was sad. And I just didn't know what to do, right? I mean, it's like, you just couldn't do anything. And about the only thing that made me happy, apart from doing the show, is I would go down these like old wrestling rabbit holes, like something that was like totally absurd, ludicrous content from like 30 years ago. And I just spent a lot of time absorbing some of that kind of stuff because it made me forget about what was going on. Like sometimes that's just sort of the best escape, is some of that stuff from when you were a kid. I would do that, and a lot of baseball card stuff, things like that. Just kind of, just going way back in time, trying to, I guess, stay away from what was going on there. Shane Guy says no comb over. That's the one thing I definitely will not do. There'll be no comb over for me. I don't color my hair. I don't do anything like that. I'm fairly just natural. I am whatever I am. John Nail went to the Clash of Champions in Savannah in 1990. I bet that was great stuff. That's back when NWA WCW had a lot of fun stuff going on. Danny Blackman says, was Mike Mizell's 81 on the front or back 9? That's pretty good. Bank 6 says WWE Network. I guess SummerSlam was last night, right? Mike D said, did you see Pat McAfee? No, I heard that he put on a show, though. I did hear about that. Noah Sheldon said I could be the new Bob Ross with like big hair. Could probably pull that off. Bank 6 says the Foreman pictures on Twitter. I got to try to find that. Because I looked for it. I don't think I saw anything. Maybe it's new. Andre Derby says, have I been able to watch practice? No, that we have not been invited to watch practice. So we're like everybody else, left to kind of, listen to whispers and rumors and things like that. Jamie Newman, I'm assuming not the Georgia quarterback, on YouTube says, is Vandy canceling football? I know they have paused operations for a moment. I guess we still haven't mentioned that in the regular show. Sometimes I forget to do stuff like that. But yeah, I think they're going to come back and play, but I guess it's kind of weird right now. And by the way, Jerry still reminds us what we mentioned a moment ago, that Nugget Warren is now officially a part of Georgia's 2021 class. That is good news. Welcome him in. I mean, it's a big get for UGA, a guy that a lot of folks really like. Good stuff all the way around there. All right, we got to get ready to go. We appreciate you being here. Big thanks to our friends at the AJC for keeping us up to date on everything happening around the world, including right here in our world. You can get your Atlanta news now at ajc.com. You can check out everything going on there. The FedEx playoffs, of course, we talked about golf a minute ago. That takes place at Eastlake. A little bit different this year because of all the stuff that's going on. But the chase for that, including yesterday with the Northern Trust, continues. Some UGA guys have been in the mix for that, so you can read about that at ajc.com. And all kinds of other things. We try to continue that battle against the coronavirus. You can stay up to date with it all at ajc.com. Find your Atlanta news now at ajc.com. Huge thanks for being a part of the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Find them online at rsandrews.com. If your air conditioning unit goes out, they can get it tuned back up for you, factory fresh specs, and keep you cool in the rest of the hot weather season that is still to come. We will be back here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll look forward to talking to you then, everybody. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.